So no matter where I travel in the country, and I work with folks from all kinds of different disciplines, to law enforcement, to special operations, to commercial banking, financial advisors, you know, we always talk about owning the room. We always talk about what it takes to be the most relevant, relatable, and resonant person with the folks in that room. Why? So you can move people to take action in these trust-depleted, disconnected times. And it's all around human connection, right? And owning the room is a skill, not just an instinct. And a very common question I get, and just got the other day, is what do I do to close the trust gaps that exist between my prospects or my clients and me, or even my associates, my employees and me? How do I close those trust gaps? And let's not forget that we live in the most trust-depleted time in American history, and in global history. The levels of social capital have dropped dramatically. All of the polling indicates that, we have a real plummet in both institutional trust, how we trust each other, and also how we trust our neighbor. Over almost 80% of Americans feel like the country is divided. So if you're a business owner, if you are a leader or a manager in a corporate organization or a nonprofit leader, or just leading in your community, not just, that's a big one, how do you close those trust gaps, right? Well, I believe that we can take a page from a guy named Captain Alex, who I worked with in Afghanistan, a Special Forces officer, Green Beret, who was working in a very, very tough area known as Cochrez. And this area was where we were trying to get village stability in place in the mid-2010 timeframe. And the villagers in the surrounding communities were not having anything of it. This was in a very, very violent area. The villagers, the elders, were very reluctant to take any kind of action. And there was one particular elder who just was not moving at all. He didn't want to discuss it. I mean, he would meet with Captain Alex and his team, but just really for 2 to 3 teams before Alex, they got nowhere. And it was one of the few areas where we just were not having success with village stability. Well, Captain Alex, I would go to a lot of these shuras with him, and I started to notice that this guy was really brilliant at asking questions. He was very engaging, and he never came off the questions. And he would look for ways to ask these thoughtful, open-ended questions. And he kept asking this one very influential elder about things that had happened in the past, about previous interactions with coalition forces. He asked what it was like before his team was there, what was it like before any Americans were here, and even what was it like when the Soviets were here. And through a series of thoughtful, open-ended questions, Alex did a couple of things. One, he started by the thoughtful nature of his questions, he started to bring the emotional temperature, as Stuart Diamond calls it, down with the elder and the other elders in the room. He validated them through those questions, because questions, we know, open people up. And so he started to get a conversation going. And eventually he started to learn things by giving the elder the opportunity to answer these thoughtful, open-ended questions through story. And it was through this thoughtful questioning that Alex learned that several rotations prior, a massive operation, counterinsurgency operation, had been conducted, and the elder had lost a nephew, and many other Afghans were killed in an airstrike that frankly was not very surgical and had caused a lot of collateral damage, of which no atonement had really been made by the coalition forces. In fact, it was kind of on the tail end of a rotation, so it kind of happened, and nothing was really done to atone for that airstrike. And so it created this simmering grievance in what is a very status society where, in tribal society, clan society, hell, anywhere in the world, if something like that happens, it creates retribution, it creates revenge. And the only way to undo that is atonement or some kind of restoration. Well, that hadn't happened. And it was through Alex's questioning that they learned that had happened. So they went back and they actually formally restored and atoned for that. They made some amends. They had a ceremonial dinner. They did some other things, paid some salacia payments. And the bottom line is they brought the collective emotional temperature of that village down. They got them ready to listen. And in short order, they had established a very credible presence in that village where no one else had been able to do it. Now think about that. In that life or death environment, a series of thoughtful, open-ended questions they were able to change the game. Now, I will tell you, I see this all the time in corporate America as I do my training and teaching. I actually teach. I'm the graduation day instructor, trainer at a Fortune 100 event, a organizational event that happens several times a year. And one of the things that I teach these emerging leaders is, hey, you know, it is very important that, you know, it's not the stories you tell often as a leader, it's the stories you ask to hear. It's not the statements you make, it's the questions you ask. And we have a whole hour that we dedicate to these thoughtful questions as part of active listening. And the feedback I get from these mid-level leaders is astounding when they go back to their organizations and they see the return on investment or return on leadership of asking powerful questions. It's just so powerful. So I encourage you to start looking at the questions you ask as a leader, and not just in your business, but in your community, with your spouse, with your children, because questions validate. We know that. The Book of Beautiful Questions is a great resource by Warren Berger. I'm reading this book right now, and I'm really fond of what he's doing of helping us use questions as a skill set and not just an instinct. I want to read to you a few passages from Warren about the power of questions that we're learning today through this new science of measuring brain activity and hooking people up to EEG machines and things like that. It's astounding what we're learning. What our grandparents taught us is actually good science now. So he says that our success in connecting, which remember is at the essence of Rooftop leadership, with others can be improved dramatically by asking more questions of ourselves and the people with whom we're trying to relate. Surprising new research suggests we become more likable to others by asking questions. Remember what I said about being the most relatable in the room? As long as they're the right type of questions asked in the right way. When asked the wrong way, questions could be confrontational and downright annoying. How many times have you been guilty of that or seen that? Hey, do you mind if I give you some feedback? Yeah, I do. Didn't ask for it. How about that one? While many of us tend to rely on generic how are you questions, more thoughtful and purposeful questions can do a better job of breaking the ice with strangers or bonding with clients and colleagues. They also enable us to forge an even stronger, deeper relationship, and this is key, with people closest to us. And worth noting in these polarizing times, questions can help us understand and begin to relate to those who see the world very differently. How cool is that? The power of questioning, which most of us don't do these days. Only a few of us are good listeners, but it's a skill we can learn. So my question to you is, what are your compelling questions right now? You should start a notebook or a journal of compelling questions. Questions that lead other people to take actions. Questions that get other people ready to listen. Questions that get other people ready to talk or take action. So let me offer a few. Here's 4 that you can put in your journal right now. What are your goals? Remember that from last week? You can ask that to anyone involved in a deal that you're making. You can ask that to your realtor. You can ask that to your boss. Hey boss, what are your goals here? When they pick themselves up off the floor, because no one ever asks them that, they'll tell you. Ask them to an elder if you're in special ops, or to a community leader if you're a law enforcement officer working community policing. Ask locals what their goals are. When's the last time we did that? What keeps you up at night? I love this question when I'm talking to a prospect who is looking to move business to me. What is it that's keeping you up at night? What is it that you're worried about when everybody else in your house is asleep? Because we know we've all been in that place, right? Another one, what would you do the first 24 hours if you had my job? That's a great question for a senior leader to ask when they're doing their walkabouts. I recently suggested this to a senior leader in a commercial bank. When he walks the cubicles and goes to other satellite locations, ask your people that. Ask them that at lunch. Ask them that while you're walking down the hall. Hey, let me ask you something. If you had my job, what's the first thing you would change in 24 hours? Then shut your mouth and get ready to listen to the goods, because you're going to get some of the most amazing feedback you've ever had in your life from the people who are doing the heavy lifting for you. You're welcome. And the final one is, what will it cost you? What will it cost you if you don't pursue this dream? How cool of a question is that to ask your teenager who's scared to death of pursuing their dream? Beautiful questions, compelling questions, The best leaders on the planet ask those things. They ask those questions instead of running their mouth and telling people how it should be. All of us could probably take a page from that and do it. So my challenge to you is pick one question and ask it for the next 7 days until we come back together again. Journal on it every day. One question. Pick that one question and just look for opportunities to ask it at least once a day to a different person, and notice the feedback you get. Notice the validation you see in their eyes. Notice the way their emotional temperature comes down, and notice the cool answers they give you and the connection that forms. This is how we own the room. Relevant, relatable, resonant. It starts with the questions we ask. If you're digging what we're doing, you should definitely come to Rooftop Leadership Live, April 3 through 5 in Tampa, Florida. We go really deep on this kind of stuff, how you can own rooms, make better connections, and lead people who don't want to follow. Thanks for what you do. Ask better questions. I'll see you on the rooftop.